So, Philly versus London. So both of these end up being their roll-up comps. They don't switch anything up after this. Ilios Lighthouse. Um, okay, so let's start off with Philly comp. I can't draw. I can't draw. Um, so standard goat. So the way standard goats works is you're sustaining. So you maintain a position on a choke point or a corner, and you can spam on the enemy throughout the engagement, and then it's kind of dependent on who spams more, and so that's also dependent on a load of other things such as microplay, um, or at least that's the general goats mirror matchup. If it's like most of the time it's dependent on who has the better map control, because if you have better map control and if you've got like say a diva to an alternate angle, setting up a crossfire, spamming down on the enemy Reinhardt, their Reinhardt is gonna get taken down a lot quicker because his shield gets taken down, and then you can engage on them. And so, without fail, if like the team who gets engaged on first will almost always lose, unless the team who's engaging is engaging too early. But if we assume that teams are engaging properly, then team that engages first wins. Meanwhile, this comp has gesture on the Winston. So, float. What is so the way Reinhardt works is very different to the way Winston works, but they're both similar in that they have the same goals. Um, Winston's goal is to, well, both of them have the job of taking and holding space, and where they are defines where how far the team can push up. So with Rhine, it's like Rhine's here. This is your space. Everything behind this is your space, or at least everything behind his shield is your space. So this area. With Winston, it's quite different. It's he he's a distraction, and then everything is your space briefly. Um, so as long as he's here, and like if the enemy are here, um, then all of this is your space. But then he doesn't actually, he can't survive that long if he's on his own. So he needs to get a lot of support from his team. Not that Ryan doesn't, but he needs to get a very short burst of high like support. So that comes in Buttering Bubble, Fury DM, uh, all of that. And so that's the main difference between these comps. This comp wants to engage like this. If we have like a timeline, um, actually let's say if we call this a graph. So on this axis is on the y-axis is um like is pressure. Apologies for my appalling handwriting. And on this axis is time. So for London, they so you end up having kind of low pressure throughout the fight. Then at the end of the fight, that spikes. Then it comes down again after everyone's dead. Meanwhile, or well, they'll have like slight bumps, um, but overall that's kind of the general pattern. Then Philly have much higher pressure because they have a shield to hide behind, and then you have like kind of a spike as the team engages, but it's not that big of a spike in comparison to London, where they've got a massive spike because they've got a load of pressure they can put on them because Winston is way better in the final fight. So that's kind of the matchup.
Very.
Honestly, in my opinion, Float probably has the advantage against Goat, because if you play it correctly, because you've got because you can do a lot to play better in floats, and so if you or like most of the time, if you're playing goats into floats, you're kind of focusing on their mistakes, whereas in floats you're focusing on your strengths, and I think that's always the best option, is to focus on your strengths, because that means that you're not limited by your comp, whereas in goats you kind of are in this matchup. Um, so I'd say London should be winning this. Okay, so we've got kind of expected setup here. So notice that Philly, including Neptuno, who's gonna jump down in a second, they're all crowded around this pillar, just all the way up, because they have a shield that can keep them up, because they are not taking a load of spam just right into them. So they can do this. This is what Ryan does. Meanwhile, here you've got all of London, or like most 4 players in London up there, and Fury can fly up there. And then you've got Gesture down here. So the reason you've got Gesture down here is just because you don't want to like give up this for free. And you kind of want to push as much as possible. And then if you can, so ideally Gesture, so this bubble was used quite early. Gesture should be like, that's questionable from Birdwing, and I think it's quite a consistent thing which Birdwing does a lot, is that his bubbles are pretty poor. But yeah, so you just want to have Gesture on the front line because you have every resource available to you to keep him alive. And so, and yeah, so the everyone here is up here because they're safe here, because they don't have a shield protecting them. And they don't want to be playing in close range, because if they play in close range without a shield, then they're just going to get spammed out and destroyed. So they just want to spam safely from here. They won't get as much damage as they would, but it also means that they can stay alive. Because remember, they're preparing for the final engagement. They don't care about now much, like at all. This part of the fight doesn't really matter to them. What matters is how they set up for the final dive. So ideally, this bubble should not be being used this early. They want to just keep Gesture here for as long as possible, and then like get a bit of spam across. But now, because they've used bubble, he can't push because EQO is going to stun him. And so he has no way to control this because of that. So I'm not sure if that's miscommunication or something, but yeah, that's my guess. Um, then Neptuno, I don't know about it's okay because Lucio can. So what I was going to say is that in most situations you kind of want um, in normal goats v goats you'll find that Lucio's kind of uh, fight for control of these pillars because then they can get boobs. Um, and obviously this isn't a normal goat v goat, but yeah, it's fine because he can get very quickly to the other side. And then you see Gesture's just around here doing nothing. Poggers! It's like now he gets pressured, he has to move back, they give up this position, and now that weakens their setup. That means that they're probably going to have to give up the point. Um, if he had been able to bubble and push forward, then they might have been able to potentially just hold this initially. But like it's 15 seconds left, so they don't care too much. This is still poor of them, though. So he goes up here, buttering bubbles to get charged, and then they kind of hide in here. He then jumps down, bubbles. I think that may have been to hurt EQO, but I'm not sure. So yeah, so he wants to try and pressure EQO. That was a dumb move because EQO has armor. Wow. And he also has a shield. So not really sure what he was doing there, but we'll go with it. And so now you see like Shadow's shield is super low for this. Like he doesn't really. They should just be moving to point. They should have transitioned to point a lot earlier because they're not actually going to get anything out of this. They've scouted. They should have seen. Okay, so they're running floats. They can't do anything to us. Let's just move to point and hide. But here they're just taking a load of unnecessary damage. Or yeah, not to. They don't even need to get go straight to point, but like, there's no reason to be just wandering around in the open. They're not going to get anything out of that. So now they transition to point. Shadow's shield is low, which is awkward. And so now you see Jester there approaching, but Boombox is over there, so I expect, considering how Gesture normally plays, I expect he will dive that. Because Gesture is a very, like, he's not, he's kind of the opposite of tunnel vision. He just, but yeah, so they can't do that because they they called it out way too late. well, they noticed it way too late, and so they were able to get this point. But and so that kind of accomplishes basically nothing. So now what happens is you see they kind of start to surround the point. Then you have Fury to the left. So what this does is, Shadow can only shield from one angle. His shield is here. If you've got people pressuring from multiple angles, he's going to suffer. This is how dive has been. This is how dive has always been played. It's like you want to abuse the fact, like abuse tension, abuse crossfires, abuse that his shield only faces one direction. So it's like he's a very two-dimensional hero, or one-dimensional even. It's like forward and backwards. Um, those are the two directions Ryan plays in. And so now you've got pressure from multiple angles, and then soon they'll be able to push it. So bubble gets used on Sado. EQ tries to punish Jester, but doesn't really get much out of it because his team aren't prepared. And then Pedosian kills Boombox because Boombox speaks. Now, EQO doesn't have shield bash up because he wasted it when he didn't need to. Or and because they can't melt Gesture, and Birdwing can just bubble Gesture. It's basically fight one because they lose that spam. Yeah, so that was by no means a perfect float. Like I think it's probably already been stated by many people that the float in Overwatch League right now is the float and goats. The goats is pretty poor. Boombox really should have been playing a lot further back. Sado should have managed his shield much better. EQO should have like had, or I don't know if it's EQO's fault, but it's like he really didn't. Stun is massive. It's like if you just push him away and then let him go again, you're not gonna you're gonna get punished later. And so now you see this thing again. You see them setting up on high ground. Reason for this is because if they set up on high ground, they can't get shot because the other team are on low ground, and so that's good because as I talked about earlier, they're taking way less. They're taking way more damage than Philly are because Philly have a shield and London don't. Philly push through here, which is this rotation is kind of, I get it because they don't want to funnel through here. If they funnel through there, then they get collapsed on by everyone. So they just want to distance themselves, because the only way it works is if Gesture decides to jump over there, and then he loses out on a jump, which is kind of what he wants to have. Is if you drop, then you don't have to use movement abilities for a relatively large, like, distance covered, and then he can just get out after dropping. So then he dives up. So this bubble here, what he wants to do with this is he kind of, so it's a combination of not wanting to take damage and also, well, it's mostly not to take damage. He doesn't take damage. He now just gets free damage on their front line, and he also poses a distraction because they're now focused on gesture and not the graph which Birdwing wants to build up here. So, and so gesture might primal this, but so now Jess dives in. Birdwing uses bubble, which is kind of poor. Like Birdwing's projected bubbles are really bad. Like, yeah, stick to Widow, and so I think they play quad DPS later. But like, whew. And so now you see, like, look where they're all focused. They're all focused at gesture. Like, so now they get bubbled, and so not bubbled, they get grabbed, and defensive ultimates forced up. So this is kind of standard with Grav. Grav is like 90% of the time, or not 90%, like 60-70% of the time, Grav is only used to bait out abilities. It's like a setup ultimate almost. And so this annoys me quite a lot when people talk about setting up ultimates so that you can grab EMP so that you can grab, because like they're still well EMP kind of works, but like the only thing it does is pull them closer together. And so that's good because it means that they can't move and you can start to fix them down. But then it's also incredibly counterable because they're still up, and so they can use any support ult, which is good for you because you want them to use support ult. And so now I think Jester's using Primal Rage because the thing about Primal is it means that he stays alive longer, and it means that he is a massive disruption to the enemy team. And it also means, hey, so we've used this ult, they've been forced to use that ult, and now if that ult begins to pose a threat, we can trans, or we can translator. And like either one is good because in whatever situation you have the translator just ready for use. Whereas they don't. So gesture dives in. And like you see, so London haven't actually engaged yet because they know, hey, these people are in a trance. They're not gonna start killing you. Or you're not gonna start killing them. And so they're still maintaining their distance, although London have engaged this because Gesture is still kind of booping them around. His main priority is just yikes. Okay, so now it's kind of a mess because they don't have a main tank. And generally in goats, if you've lost someone, then it's pretty big. So Boombox dies again early because Boombox is out of position pretty consistently. Carpe is stunned. Why is Carpe stunned? Because of Prophet. Okay. So Carpe's there, Prophet's there, that's Bedusin. And now Neptune's used beat. So reasoning behind Prophet using Rally is because it's a counter rally. But his EQO used it in Graph because he wanted to build it up for a counter engage, and so now Prophet can counter, and they have the same advantage, but theirs, and it's like it doesn't make a difference. Whoever cast it first, really. The bomb is kind of to split, I expect, but they kind of gave us gestures. Point of view. So gesture. Okay, so okay, so now we get a snapshot of the entire fight. So Sadio's moved to point. Carpe, BQ, Boombox, and Poco are here. Where is Neptuno? Neptuno is probably also there. Either that or he's on point. So, and then all of London is set up over here. That's unfortunate. So, poops him off. Yeah, okay, so Neptune is over there. And so now, Philly start transitioning to point. And then they go Grav. So, you kind of need the Grav here because or do you need the Grav there? Okay, so Grav bomb. And then, so, okay. I want to talk about Grav bomb for a second because that was a really poor usage. I don't. So, okay. Thing about Grav bomb is that it does work. I'm not gonna deny that it does work, but it's so inconsistent and often you can just get more value by just having a diva DMing you in it, a diva in mech DMing you, because now you've got Poco out of mech, who you've just been able to kill. So, firstly, if you do get the Grav bomb off, you don't get any value you don't get any ult by getting a 6-man Grav bomb. It's like, congratulations, where's your ult charge next fight? And so you'll see a lot of, and it's like you see a lot of like casters go, oh my god, it's huge, and then they get hugely messed up because they're hyping up this team that have just got a 6-man Grav bomb and then they immediately lose the next fight because, oh my god, they don't have any ults, and so no one calls that out, which is understandable, but it's annoying. For another thing, it's also in a you're in a comp with a load of shield. You have Carpe, EQO, Sado. All of them can body block. Or no, sorry. So Carpe has 2 shields. Ikkyo has, well, so shouldn't call them by their names, but okay. Zaya has 2 shields. Brig has 1 shield. Sado has a massive shield. Pinning one of them, pinning Sado, you've still got Carpe. You might kill the Rhine, but like, it's why. And so generally, I much prefer if you just D.Va bomb to split. I dislike just having a D.Va be there to DM you as you walk forward into the grav, and or if there's no way they can defend against it, like they don't have any supports, then D.Va matrix into it and just. But so right now you've used a pretty valuable ult, and oh look, it hasn't got, and now you've lost because you lost so much by using an ult which you didn't need to and expecting it to work. It's like panic ulting. It's like you see it in tier 3, tier 4. It's kind of not what I'd expect of Overwatch League teams. Okay, this is interesting. Jester swapped over to the Reinhardt. Okay. So he I feel like this is kind of I don't know. But this point does work with float because you have multiple entrances to the point, which is hugely valuable. I think he probably I think he probably just expected that he'd get punished, or maybe he's not able to contest the point properly with it. I'm not sure about that. And so obviously there's good value in both comps, but maybe he's just more comfortable with the mirror. And chose to swap over that. But so he used Primal, and then I'm not completely sure. Okay, so fighting over this corner is generally not a great idea because you expose yourself to this little guy. And if you expose yourself to someone early in the fight, then you're going to start. And if you take damage that early in the fight, then that's really bad in GOAT because it's kind of who has more pressure on. What happened there? Okay. So, noted where Carpe is looking. Notice how Neptuno just flew across the screen. Um, yeah, so this happens too much. Neptuno stole Sado's bubble, and Sado tried to push and died because of it. So, oh, and that's bad because if you lose your Reinhardt early, then you take every bit of spam and they can walk into you. Um, that's a demonstration of what happens if you play floats on low ground, basically, um, or if you play floats next to the enemy team. So now, okay, so let's look at these ults. Okay, so you have two CC ults. So I just want to talk about the differences between these. So Grav is a setup ult, generally. Um, you use it early in the fight because it's incredibly easy to use early in the fight. Like, it's don't get it swallowed, and it's the easiest thing. Just accidentally deleted my P, but whatever. That sounds bad. I shouldn't have pointed that out, should I? So then you okay. Then you also have gesture with shatter. So shatter is a finisher. Finisher. It's a finisher because they are laying on the ground, and usually against Goat, it finishes the fight because if you can do it properly. If you because but the thing is, it's balanced because you need a lot of work to get a good shatter off, whereas you don't need a lot to get a good grab off. If you grab, it's fairly easy to get it swallowed. Um, but everyone is also clumped together, and that's it. They're not on the ground. They can use everything they need to. It's fine. Whereas Shatter, everyone is on the ground, can't do anything, but it's also hard to land, and it's hard to get a situation where where one of them who you need to be on the ground is turns out like is actually on the ground, because oftentimes you might get like Neptuno here. So that's why that's the difference between them. So and also it's always like it's always much better to have um it kind of fits into your economy, your rotation. Sorry, having if you grab and then Ryan swings into it, gets the shatters. These two, that doesn't matter. That's like a micro. It's like, hey, I'm giving you extra armor. You just use that when the enemy brig uses that because um, it's useful, but it's like it doesn't actually have an impact on the macro of the fight. It does help, but doesn't. I wouldn't actually consider it an ult most of the time, to be honest, or at least it doesn't fit into the same category, kind of thing. Um, it's like Grav or Shatter. Then Diva Bomb, what that does is to split. It's super good to split, super good engagement tool, and that's also to some extent a setup. It could also be a finisher, um, but usually its setup is you won't get a lot of kills out of it, provided the enemy play properly. Meanwhile, in Philly, they have nothing, so they're just gonna want to charge. Um, they probably want to charge trans and shatter as quickly as possible, um, and then they can trans, grav, and potentially shatter. So again, like the thing is, the shatter matchup is kind of dependent on which team can set up for the shatter better, which is a lot about like map control and how divas play and all the micro involved in space control. Um, so now, okay, so observers helpfully didn't show us what actually happened, but okay, so he triggers shatter, Sado puts shield down. Oh dear, he literally just got everyone. Okay, I take back the part about needing a lot of setup. Jesus. Okay, so that's just poor, like, ults from them because Philly don't actually get anything out of that. Then that's it. Yeah. Okay, so I'm probably gonna end it there. Hopefully it was useful. Let's go.